Welcome to the Fix and Fly podcast, where we help businesses fly by helping identify and fix common business issues before they become major problems. I'm your host, Larissa Logan. Having grown up in a small business family and spending the last 20 years of my career fixing big businesses at some of the top firms like EY and Deloitte, I've seen the same problems come up time and time again. So tune in each fortnight so you can stay up to date on what to look out for in your day-to-day business life. I'm really excited to introduce you to Rachel Paris. Rachel is an awesome lawyer who spent 2 decades working at Bell Gully. She has also got her master's from Harvard, and she has now written her first novel. Is there anything else this woman can do? Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So, you've written a book. How did that happen? How did you go from 6-minute timesheets to writing a novel?
Yeah, right, big change. So as a kid, I actually loved reading, loved writing, wanted to be a writer, but then, you sort of hit reality at high school and that seemed like a really crazy idea for a career. So I found myself as a lawyer. I don't think any girls have dreams of growing up to be a banking lawyer, but that's kind of what happened.
And but how interesting that actually writing is an integral part of being a lawyer. So yes. A childhood passion you've kind of been able to explore in your last 2 decades, founding and leading the fintech practice at Bell Gully.
Yeah, I definitely took the long way around, but you're right. So law is all about words and abstract concepts and stories. And so it was just... It took me a long time to figure out that I wanted to be more on the creative side. But, I loved my 2 decades as a transactional lawyer, but it was time to do something different. And it turns out a lot of those skills are really transferable. So, so I've been lucky in that sense.
So doing a bit of background on you, I see that you've got no little than 2 degrees, 2 masters. You studied at Harvard. And you also recently won the Phoenix Prize, which has brought your book to life. How have you managed to implement time and space for you to be able to write and be creative?
It's funny. I had always thought, if you're a writer, you get to sit in this beautiful room and spend all day just sort of with your thoughts, and it's not like that, of course, at all, because you're a parent, life is happening all around you. So occasionally I get to go away and maybe have, a day without interruptions, but most of the time I am hamstrung, between the school hours. There are days where I'm in the flow and suddenly I'm interrupted. Other days where I've got the time and, the idea doesn't come. But I do think that true creativity comes from constraint. So actually sometimes if you've only got 40 minutes and you're forcing yourself to be creative in that time, it's amazing what you can come up with. You just have to force yourself to write something. It might be absolute rubbish, but you can always go back and refine it. And that writing's an iterative process. You have to keep going back. So just doing it, taking action instead of thinking about it is probably the key lesson that I've learned.
So how long did it take you to write your first draft? And what type of time management skills did you implement to assist you with getting it to that stage and meeting the deadlines?
I've really changed the way I approach it. I was very much taking my time, playing around with ideas. But one thing that is really counterintuitive, especially coming from law where it's all about productivity and, as you say, the 6-minute billable units, is that you might spend a day writing or a morning writing, and then actually the most productive thing you can do is delete half of it. And that is a killer. It's so depressing to see all of this effort go. But what I've learned is that what you take away is often more progress than what you add. Sometimes you think that, just continually steaming ahead without really taking time to reflect and then cut out what's unnecessary is, the most important step in the process. So that has been an adjustment to my thinking. And I think also just, being quite disciplined about any time I've got available. If I'm not feeling the words coming, then I use that time to edit or maybe read something that's going to trigger some creative flow.
And you're writing in the car when you're waiting at kids' appointments. And
absolutely, that's it. So I literally, if I've got 15 minutes, even 10 minutes, I will use that time. So, I sit in the orthodontist waiting room and tap away, on my phone if I don't have my laptop. Wherever I am, if I'm waiting to meet a friend for coffee, if I'm walking the dogs, I'm either writing or I'm thinking about writing or I'm listening to a podcast about writing or I'm reading, because obviously good writers read a lot. So I'm always trying to squeeze every productive second out of the time that's available to me when I'm not with friends and family.
Yeah, and I think a lot of business owners would have similar challenges around time management and trying to fit it all in with family, work, growing a business, the challenges with businesses in this current economic climate. And they have very high expectations of themselves. They have a lot of stress on their shoulders from trying to keep a business operating, liquidity issues, trying to keep staff employed. What types of expectations do you have on yourself, and what are some of the expectations that others have on you? And I guess, how have you been able to manage all of this with your very busy life?
I've come a long way on this front. I think back in my lawyer days, where transactional work, I definitely put my health on the back burner, and it was all about, meeting client expectations, being available, in crazy deadlines. But I think what I have learned over time is that you can't be effective at your work if you're not effective in your personal life. If you don't have good relationships, if you're not looking after your health. And it sometimes feels really difficult to carve that time out, but that is what I do. I'm naturally actually quite a shy person. I've just had to go out and find my people, and it's been the best thing I could have done, because actually sharing that mental load, your worries, your self-doubt with people who are going through the same thing is hugely valuable. And actually, people that could be regarded as your competitors are often the exact people who are going through the same challenges. And so if you sort of have this community, people are really generous and supportive, and that's been what has carried me through the last couple of years, and I'm sure will help me as I go forward.
Have you been able to draw on advice from this community to be able to assist you in driving your brand at pivoting into the creative space, trying to get your book published, and it's going to be in the bookstores in the next couple of weeks? I mean, I'm going to walk into a Whitcoulls and I'm going to be able to pick it up.
I still can't believe it. It's bizarre. So when I think there's this weird thing when you're writing a book, you are sitting in a room, most of the time by yourself, or in a orthodontist, waiting room, or wherever you are doing the writing, but it's solitary, you're by yourself. And the last thing on my mind was author brand or my personal brand. I mean, it just did not occur to me until I had my publishing deal. And I've got a lot of friends in marketing and related sort of areas. The market out there is so crowded. You feel like it's the hardest thing on earth to get your book published. But then the moment your book's coming out, there's suddenly thousands of other books out there, and you think, oh my goodness, no one is ever going to know about my book. So you have to put yourself out there, because otherwise the book's going to die and no one will read it. And what I've realised is you just have to be authentic. There's no point going off on a tangent and trying to be something that you're not. Not only would that come across as jarring and false, but I think also it's not sustainable. I've got to be me, so I'm going to start sharing more of myself on social media, which is super cringy. And
oh my goodness, and I've seen that on LinkedIn, and you have been so open and about failure, about the fear of failure. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, it's hard, right? I went into writing coming from quite a senior legal role, and into something where I'm a complete rookie. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I think one thing that can stop people making a change in their career or founding that business that they've always wanted to found is worrying about failure. What will people think? What if I'm hopeless? I mean, I went through all of that. It is scary, but the good thing about getting a bit older is you realise it's just all a wasted emotion. Like all of that imposter syndrome I had for years as a lawyer. What's the point? I mean, in the end, there's so much that you can do in your life if you put yourself out there.
I think it's really inspirational, and I think, failure is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow. And I think when we have our most growth in our lives is when we find it the hardest and we think, oh my God, I cannot do this. This is too hard.
failure is not necessarily doing something and not doing well at it or it not working out. Failure is not trying it in the first place or not taking on feedback and adjusting what was plan A to plan B. Resetting what success and failure is so important because otherwise we don't grow. So, who knows? This book may do well. It might be a complete disaster. But for me, the failure would have been not actually trying to write the book in the first place. That's kind of what I'm here for. That's the point of it all.
And I think that's similar to business owners that I deal with, that when I'm working with them, I give them a plan A, B and a C, right? So there's multiple exit plans. Plan A is the most preferable. But, you need to have those backup plans of if that doesn't work, what will we do next? And be able to pivot to plan B or C. What I wanted to just touch on is around your writing process. So there must have been times where you'd written your first draft, it's gone to the publisher, and now they are cutting pieces out of the book. I am interested to understand, how did you deal with that? Because that was your baby. That is something you have been working on for a very long time. How did you deal with that, and where did you kind of draw the line in the sand to say, this is the maximum amount of cuts that can occur on this book, because otherwise I lose myself in it?
Such a good question, and there's so much racing through my mind. What happens with traditional publishing as opposed to sort of self-publishing is the publisher will buy your manuscript. And at that point, you as the author think, oh, it's done, it's great. Yes, there might be a few typos, but this is the book that people are going to read. What the publisher has actually bought is the minimum viable product, if we're going to use commercial language. It is the very basic draft. You are going to go through a minimum of 3 quite substantial edits from that point. I didn't know any of this, right? So with my story, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but in the first bit of feedback I got from the publisher after they'd talked to some of their international contacts was, we want you to change the person that dies at the start of the book. So that was quite a big change. And so for about 3 days, I was like, oh my God, this goes to the heart of the story. I thought in the end, you know what? I am going to rewrite the first half of the book to address their suggested change to see if I can do it. I'm still learning to write. Can I actually pull this off? I thought I'd give it a shot. And actually where I landed was the revised version, which is the version that people will read in the bookstore, is a better outcome. I didn't believe it at first. I was furious for a few days. I felt sorry for myself, but I did go away and reflect, and I'm really glad that I took that advice on board. So you do have to have a clear sense of what you're trying to achieve and your purpose, but at the same time, you have to be prepared to adjust and change, because I was taking advice from experts. These editors looking at the book with fresh eyes could see either errors or parts that were confusing or things that didn't make sense that I just was blind to after so long with the manuscript. I guess it's the same as you walking into a business, right?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. It is exactly the same as me walking into a business. So I'll walk into a business and I'll make recommendations of how can we make this business more efficient, more viable, how can we provide longevity to these business owners. Often, business owners, they take time to actually be able to undertake the recommendations that I've made, because, like you say, it is very personal to you.
Exactly. And I think the thing to remember, because of course, you feel sort of the emotions, but you know that your advisor, in my case, that was my editors, in your case, that's you, as an external coming into a business, you've got your client's best interests at heart, just as my editors have got my book's best interests at heart. So we're all on the same team. And I think once you realise the alignment of purpose, it's a lot easier to move forward.
One other thing I wanted to touch on is just around cash flow. So what I wanted to understand with you, in this space, you don't get paid a salary or a wage. Do you want to explain the inconsistent kind of cash flow that you receive as a writer, how that works, and how you kind of manage the peaks and troughs?
As a writer, you're definitely having to self-fund until you have got a complete manuscript. So there is no income stream while you are just beavering away, So most people, obviously, during that period of time are still working full-time or at least part-time. Then if you get a publishing deal, you will get what's called an advance against royalty. So that is a sort of lump sum, but it is staged in milestones. So even if it's a decent amount, you're not going to get that all the day that you sign the contract. So you might get a little bit contract signature, then a bit when you deliver a next draft and so on, right through to the day that the book is published. So it's very drawn out. And then you go and sell the books, and every time they sell a book, you get a royalty, which is a small amount. But that goes back to paying the advance off that you've already received. So it can take a really long time to earn your advance out. So that is a huge exercise in cash flow management because you just cannot continue to live the life that you used to unless you've got other plans in place. At the moment, I have stopped practicing law and I'm going to try and write full time. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully people will buy the book. But it's definitely a matter of preparing for those cash flow ups and downs. I mean, it's just vital and also adjusting the way you live your life.
Given the current economic conditions, this is some really great advice for business owners to really, be reflective and take a step back and have a look at the costs that you're incurring. Can you peel those back to be viable in order to sustain the length of time until you receive your next piece of income? What is the best piece of advice you have been given during this time that you've been writing?
I think the best piece of advice is to wait until you've got something you're really proud of to get published. Don't rush to get the first thing out the door, because once it's out there, it's out there forever. You have to really be patient with the process. Wait till you've got something that you're really happy with, because otherwise you'll be judged forever.
And you can probably draw a parallel to a business that's trying to, go through an R&D process, create a new product, get it to market, to actually take that time to really refine it and undertaking financial analysis to see, is it going to be commercially viable? And what are the biggest challenges you have had to overcome during this process?
Gosh, so many. I mean, I think the biggest thing is learning to take feedback without any ego or defensiveness. I mean, it's really, really hard. Have you had that situation where you've given advice to your clients? I know I did when I was a lawyer, and they've said no, or
often it takes them time to kind of turn their minds to what the next steps look like, because quite often when I go into a business to try to help them, it may result in restructuring their business, and that may involve, closing down non-performing units, stopping doing something, and that's quite often the hardest thing. Sometimes there might be redundancies of staff, which is super hard, and it just takes a director time to sometimes understand what the implications are if they don't follow those recommendations. So I quite often will do a timeline and show them, well, if you don't make these changes now, what are the consequences?
It's the thing, it's actually deferring a hard decision today to lots of hard decisions in the future, right?
Exactly.
And that's true of the writing, and it sounds like it's true of being in the world of business.
Okay, so tell us what's next for you.
So in a few weeks, my debut novel, See How They Fall, comes out. So this is the cover. So that'll be really exciting. It's going to be in Bookhools and Paper Plus and, all the indie bookstores. So I cannot wait for the day that I can walk into a bookshop and see it sitting on the shelf. That'll be absolutely surreal. So I've got, book launch and a few sort of library events, and then just cracking on with book number 2. So, no rest, but it's, really exciting.
That is so great. And we will have in the show notes below details of where you can buy the book, when it's out, and we hope that you support Rachel in her endeavours. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun. I've loved it.